你的救恩能够真的是被万国所见证到。
So God did bless us.
所以我们真的是确认到神真的是祝福我们。
God gave us this building.
神给了这个万国园，给了我们了。
And we try to follow. We name it All Nations Hub.
所以我们把这栋楼起名叫万国园，是因为我们真的要全心的来跟随主的脚步。
Because this is our heart. We want to see nations to see the salvation of the Lord.
盼望万国、万族、万民都归向神，这就是我们的祷告，这也是我们的旨意。
Somebody, maybe you are still at my stage when in 2006, 2007.
坐在我们当中的很多人，可能就像2006年、07年一样，我那个华人的观点，我没有改变。
Because the pastor said, "Can you come to serve the 16 nations here?"
当那个牧师说：“你可不可以来帮我一起服侍这16个国家的人呢？”
You might say, "Well, I know Chinese.
你或说你会去说：“我是中国人，我只知道中国话。”
I have a Chinese stomach.
我有中国胃啊。
All I can do is Chinese.
我只可以跟华人在一起。
And that was my mistake.
这就是我从前的我的。
Maybe some of you are still at the stage now.
也许许多当中，我们的很多人已经改变了，也许到今天也还是个想法。
I know lots of you.
但是我相信我所知道的。
We begin to have kingdom mindset.
我们当中很多人已经在改变了。
In the past, we got Chinese mindset.
从前我们是华人的思维。
And some people might have, I have Hong Kong mindset.
还有很多人会有说我是香港人的思维。
I have mainland China mindset.
那还有说我是内地文化的思维。
But we need to have kingdom mindset.
今天我们要转化的就是天国的文化，天国的。
That's why Jesus told the disciples.
所以耶稣对他们
The first prayer, "Your kingdom come."
所以当主导我们的第一句话就是愿你的国降临，其实愿你的天国降临在我们当中。
Jesus didn't teach the Jewish people, "Yes, your kingdom come to our Jewish people."
耶稣没有教导那个本土化的那个犹太人说，愿你的天国降临在我们犹太人的里面。
His kingdom come.
愿神的国降临在我们当中。
His kingdom is his kingship.
他的天国是他的王权，是天上的王的王权。
When every one of us being ruled by God,
所以当我们每一个人有一个愿意降服在那个王权之下的时候，
so we're no longer, having Chinese as our identity.
所以我们不再是华人成为我们的生命的身份的一个象征。
Our ultimate identity, we belong to the kingdom.
那你和我的身份，我们属于天国人，我们是天国的身份。
Today, I would like to show you this cross.
所以今天我要给你来看，让你看这个十字
Because
架，
this cross has been to many cities.
因为这个十字架曾经跟我们走了很多的城市。
And one day, one man said, cross is very offensive.
有人告诉我说，十字架很讨厌，十字架会不舒服，让人家看到不舒服。
And cross is, pointing to death.
十字架代表着死亡的象征。
And I don't like, talking about death, particularly Chinese New Year.
对于华人来说，我们不太愿意讲关于死的事情。在中国新年的时候，也不要讲死。
And they might say, well, Christianity having cross is very exclusive.
基督徒、基督教专门讲十字架，这个是真的是很排他啊。
You are not like us. We believe in Buddha and we also believe in many other gods.
那佛教徒他们说，你知道吗？我信菩萨，但是我也信佛，我也拜其他所有的偶像。
And some Chinese people say, well, this is a Jewish people, nothing to do with us.
很多的华人会说，这个是犹太人所信的，跟我们没关系，跟我是华人。
I had an opportunity to speak to some Muslim people who came to speak
我
to me.
跟穆斯林的这个朋友们聊天的时候，他们后来信主了。
没有，我有去讲。He said, well, the cross is, it's not for us.
他说十字架不是跟我们没关系啊，
It's nothing to do with us.
跟我们完全搭不上边啊。
But I told him that I said, cross is most inclusive message that have been preached.
十字架是一个极其的包容性的一个象征，一个信息。
When Jesus dying on the cross,
当耶稣被钉死在十字架上的时候，
his arms wide open.
他的双臂大大的展开，
He said, Father, forgive, for they know not what they are doing.
他说：“父啊，赦免他们，因为他们不知道他们所做的是什么。”
Who did he cry out to the Father to forgive?
那这一个耶稣他呼喊天父要饶恕什么呢？
I am definitely sure he was crying out to the Father to forgive those Roman soldiers.
那我绝对相信，这个时候耶稣呼喊的时候，父啊，你要赦免那些罗马士兵。
I am definitely sure that he cried out to Father to forgive for those religious leaders who crucified him to the cross.
在那个时刻，耶稣，我相信肯定他有在哭喊的，向父哭喊的说，这些宗教领袖他们是何等的。
He cried out to God to forgive another robber who ridiculed him.
那他也向天父呼喊的，因为在3个时代当中有一个强盗正在嘲笑他。
He cried out to God to forgive those who ridiculed him, who passed by.
那他可能也在哭喊的说：“父啊，饶恕他们，那些看到他、经过他却留不下。”
So Jesus dying on the cross is not only for Jewish people.
所以耶稣钉死在十字架上，不仅仅是为了犹太人而钉死。
He asked God to forgive is not only for Jewish people.
他要求神赦免的不仅仅是赦免犹太人的罪，
It's for every one of us. The example of Jesus.
那今天我们真的，当我们说我们是基督徒，我们要来跟随耶稣的榜样。
We need to embrace the nations.
我们需要拥抱万国的那个心态。
And I know here, lots of us, you have a heart to embrace the nations.
那今天我相信，在我们当中，神已经改变了很多人，有一个拥抱万国的心。
Almost we're so thankful that David and Susan are going to be here and they're going to share a bit.
所以待会我们相信 David 牧师和他的太太，他会在我们当中分享。
They have been to, in mission for about 30 years.
他们在这个宣教的工厂里面将近快30
They've
年，
been to many countries,
他们去了许许多多的国家，
many different people.
他们遇见了许许多多各种文化的人。
And later, Amy, she will share
那接下来我们也会请艾米宣教师在我们当中分享，
how she have a heart to embrace Africa.
他怎样有一个心愿意来拥抱非洲的。
So today I would love everybody
所以我们真的是欢迎今天，我们真欢迎你们。
to receive the kingdom mindset.
今天我们是不是时间让我们来转化我们的思维，有天国的思想，
Let's embrace the
让我
nations.
们来一起拥抱万国吧。
Yesterday in this hall,
昨天在这个礼堂，
possibly about 80 people from Nigeria and different countries of Africa.
昨天在这里有来自非洲的大概差不多80多个的弟兄姊妹在这里敬拜神。
Yesterday at the same time in Joshua Hall,
昨天也在同个时间，我们的约书亚堂，
there are about 40 to 50 Portuguese-speaking people
那有
from South America,
葡萄牙
from
语的
Europe.
葡萄牙语的弟兄姊妹，从欧洲来的，从南美洲来的，都在那一个礼拜堂做礼拜。
In Moses Hall,
在大卫厅，
there are maybe 15, 20 people worshiping God together.
在摩西厅里面，我们大概有40到50个人，不停的在4个小时里面敬拜、赞美和祷告，
And it's beautiful.
真的是非常的美好。
And that let us see a taste of what Jesus is embracing.
那让我们来体会一点点，品尝一点点耶稣在十字架上的他那个最后的包容的那个包容万国的那个祷告。
Thank you so much.
谢谢
Can
大
we
家。
welcome David and Susan? Come
好，
to
那我们
share
欢
a
迎
bit.
来。
Thank you. I do.
Yeah.
可以翻过那个字。
I'm amazed he's holding the cross all this time.
他一直拿着十字架，辛苦了。
Daniel, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you and to share. And thank you, church, for the opportunity to share as well.
他说谢谢我们有机会在这边一起来分享，也谢谢教会。
Susan and I are very, very blessed to be able to, at this point in our lives, come to Liverpool and be a small part of what God is doing here.
但是 Susan 和我很高兴能够在这个时间段来到利物浦，也许在这边做一点点神要做的事情。
And when Daniel asked if we would share a little bit about our journey with mission and about missions, there were just a few thoughts that came to mind.
所以当我邀请他来分享一下他在宣教上的一些体会的时候，那现在我想是讲几点。
Susan and I, we first, thank you, Jean, so much. When we were university students in college many years ago,
但是很多年前，我跟 Susan 在大学读书的时候，
we began to really know the Lord in a deeper way.
我们开始在更深入的去认识神。
And we began to discover that God could take very ordinary people like us who don't, not extraordinary, just normal people.
我们发现一个秘密，就是上帝可以用像我们这么普通的人做他不普通的事。
And let them be a part of the extraordinary things that he's doing in the world.
我们可以做着他在世界上做的很奇特的事情的一部分。
And it struck us then that he was so much more interested in our availability than our abilities, than what we could do for him, that we wanted to be with him.
让我们更多的那个受触动的是，上帝看重的是我们对他开放的心情，而不是我们的能力。
And the passage that comes to mind when I remember that time is when Jesus called Peter and James and John to come and follow him.
当这个触动的信息，就是当那个主耶稣呼召彼得、约翰、雅各的时候，那个信息。
They were fishing and he came up to them and he said, "Follow me."
所以他们在打鱼呢，但是耶稣上来说：“你跟从我。”
And then he said, "And I will make you fishers of men."
然后他说我要让你得人如得鱼。
And the thing I love about that passage is there's a command.
那个信息我很喜欢的是，因为那是个命令。
And as I get older, I see it more as an invitation.
当我老一点的时候，我发现那个原来也是邀请，
But there's also a promise.
同时也是个允许。
The command or the invitation was, "Follow me, come be with me."
那个命令或那个邀请是说，来跟我在一起。
And the promise was, "And I will make you fishers of men."
那个应许呢，就是我把你变成得人如得鱼的人。
And so as I was reflecting on Daniel's invitation, I was spending some time in Psalm 22 yesterday.
所以当我在预备的时候，我在反思，我在朗读诗篇22篇。
We're not going to study it in depth. I'm just going to mention a couple of thoughts from it.
所以我不会分享很深入，只是讲几个这段经文。
But Psalm 22, it's David pouring out his heart.
所以诗篇22篇是大卫将他心倾倒给神。
And in doing so, he prophetically pictures the scene that Daniel was just talking about with Jesus' arms extended on the cross.
所以在这个中间，他在描述了，事实上大卫在描述了刚才所展示的耶稣在十字架上彰显的这个张开双臂的信息。
And, starting in verse 12, he says, "Many bulls encompass them." I'll just let you read 12 through 19.
我朗读下12节到19节。许多公牛环绕我，巴山大力的公牛四面围困我，他们向我张口，好像猎食恐叫的狮子。我如水被倒出，我的骨头就脱了节，我的心如蜡在我里面融化，我的精力枯干如同瓦片，我的舌头贴紧上颚。你将我安置在死灰中，犬类围绕我，恶党环绕我，他们扎了我的手，我的脚，我数遍我的骨头，他们睁眼看着我，他们分我的外衣，也为我的内衣里衣。 抽签。耶和华啊，求你不要远离我，我的救主啊，求你快来帮助我。
And what strikes me is that almost, over 900 years before Jesus was born, David clearly describes what Jesus experienced on the cross. His hands and his feet pierced, his side pierced, lions surrounding him.
所以让我很吃惊的是，大约耶稣上十字架前900年前，大卫就已经预言到那个主耶稣的手和脚都被刺透，还有旁边被刺透，也就是那些狮子，那个邪恶的人来攻击他。
And I think you've probably heard this passage, and you've probably heard sermons on this passage before.
也许你听过这个信息，也听过这样子的讲道。
But there's another promise, there's another prophecy in this passage that David makes that I think is very relevant for what we're talking about with all nations.
有另外一段信息，也是另外一个预言，是跟我们今天的信息非常贴近的。
So beginning in verse 26.
在26节
through 31
到31节，我在愿困苦的人吃得饱足，愿寻求耶和华的人赞美他，愿你们的心永远活着。地的四极都要想念耶和华，并且归顺他；列国的万族都要在你面前敬拜，因为国度属于耶和华，是他管理列国的。地上富足的人都必吃喝而敬拜。凡下到尘土中不能存活、自己信任的人，都要在他面前下拜。必有后裔侍奉他，主所做的事必传给后代，他们必传他的公义给尚未出生的子民，这是他的作为。
And what I love about this is especially verse 27 when it says, all the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before you.
我特别被27节触动，地的四极都要想念耶和华，并且归顺他，列国的万族都要在他面前敬拜。
So when Susan and I were praying about this next season of our lives, and God opened the opportunity to come to Liverpool.
所以当我们Susan 和我在祷告我们下一个季节的服事的时候，神打开了利物浦的门。
What has been in the back of our minds is this promise of what is God doing in the world?
所以这个应许就是上帝的作为是什么？
And his promise is that he's bringing all the families of the nations to himself.
所以这个应许是什么呢？神要将万族所有的家庭都到他那里面。
And early in our ministry, I think we were very motivated by the need, just how much need there was. We went to Eastern Europe. It was after the fall of communism, where atheism had reigned, and we felt the need to take the truth of the gospel into that place.
我们侍奉的起初更多的是看见需要，特别是我们这个几十年前看见东欧那个共产主义的倒塌之后，东欧的人那个无神论的心里的空虚，所以他觉得要在那边传福音。
But now, 30 years later,
30年后呢？
the shift that's happened is our shift has gone from carrying the burden of the need of the nations on our shoulders.
所以30年后，这个转换是以前就是把这个需要扛在自己的肩膀上。
To really realizing what Daniel said, that when Jesus was on the cross, he carried the burden of the nations on his shoulders.
意识到，就像我刚才所讲到的，就是当主耶稣在十字架上的时候，事实上他承担万国的重担。
And down through these many years and many different countries and many different situations, I see one truth again and again and again.
在过去的30年的服事的高低之中，我始终都看见一个真理。
And it's that God is building his kingdom and it will not be stopped.
是神自己在建立他的国度，没有人可以停止。
And so the amazing thing, every place I've been in the world, I find that God is raising up men and women and young people and older people, and he's giving them dreams and heart and passion for the things he wants to do through their lives.
所以我每到一个地方，我都发现神在各地兴起不同的人，给他意向，给他梦想，给他那个装备，让他在那服侍。
And some other time, when we have more time and have more opportunity to share with you, I would love to look from Genesis to Revelation and see the unstoppable work of God's kingdom and what he's doing in the world, what he's promised he'll do.
下次我有机会带领大家从创世纪到启示录，一起看看神要做的事情是如何不可阻挡。
But today, what's exciting to me is that in this place, in Liverpool, where you have so many nations, God is at work here in this room, but he's working all across this city in hearts of people we don't even know yet.
所以在这个城市，我会发现有这么多的种族，这么多的神把这么多的国家在这里，我们在这边的服侍到整个城市，服侍到万族。
And he gave you as a church a vision for an all nations center. He gave Daniel this wonderful journey from Nottingham to here.
那时候给我本人从诺丁汉带到这里的一个经历，也给我们大家一个这样子的那个万国远。
But there are just so many passages, and it's so hard not to go into them this morning. But just one that I'll mention, and it's one you know well, and it's this: I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
所以，我想用一句话来鼓励大家，就是那个主耶稣亲口说的：“我要建造我的教会，地狱的门是不可胜过，阴间的门都不能胜过。”
And so, that is our hope. That is what is God doing in the world? He is building his church, and he does it through us. He does it through his people. But the burden and the weight is not on our shoulders. He is going to do it, and he is inviting us into that.
所以我们今天要见证一个信实，就是神在建造他的教会，所以那个重担是在他的身上，我们有幸参与他，见证他的作为。
And so the shift is from this sense of burden that we have to carry to accomplish something for God.
所以这个转换就是以前就觉得说我要承担这个重担，现在呢就是我要参与见证神的作为。
To an invitation to join him in what he's doing and experience intimacy with him as we are with him in what he's doing in the world.
所以呢，接受这个邀请，参与他的服事。
And so that's a lot of our heart in coming is we just thought if we could be right in the middle of this juncture of so many nations and God working in the Iranians and the Chinese and so many different people groups, wouldn't that be amazing to get to know God more deeply, more intimately as we're with him as he is building his church, because he is going to build it. He's already built it. He's going to continue.
所以我们非常感恩，把我们放在万国园这个交叉路口，把我们放在一个这么多种族的地方，不是我们要做什么，而是我亲眼要见证他在建造他的教会，神已经在建造他的教会，在伊朗人中，在华人中，在外国中，我们是有幸参与。
And so to me, that's a radical change that he's inviting us into. It's an invitation that we have to believe that he's actually doing this. He's actually at work, and it's not on our shoulders, but we can join him.
所以对我来说，接受这个邀请是件很美好的事情，因为我们相信，不是我们担负重担，我们去见证他的作为，我们有份参与他的作为。
And just leave you with this last thought. In Psalm 46:10, again, the psalmist says, "Be still and know that I'm God."
所以最后我鼓励大家，诗篇的46:10，安静知道我是神。
Put that right beside Jesus' words to Peter, "Follow me."
所以把这个放在耶稣对彼得的呼召，来跟随我，
Come be with me.
过来跟我在一起。
So the invitation that Jesus gives us is not to go change the world.
所以耶稣的邀请不是说你去把世界给改变了，
It's first to be still and to know him.
所以最先是开始安静认识他。
But the verse doesn't stop there. It continues with the promise.
所以那个经文没有停在那边，而是继续有个应许。
And he says, "I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted on the earth."
所以我会在外国中被举起，在地上被高举。
So the invitation, be with him, know him. The promise, he will be exalted in Liverpool. He will be exalted in all nations. He will be exalted on the earth. he will build his kingdom. He will make his work known in the world.
所以这个邀请就是来与他亲近。这个应许是他要建造他的国度，他要在利物浦建造他的那个教会，他要在我们生命中来建造。
So that's our heart in coming, is to be alongside and with you on this journey of going deeper in knowing him and discovering the amazing things he's going to do.
所以这是我们的心愿，我们来到这边跟大家一起更深的经历神，一起去经历神在这边的作为。
It's okay, Pastor Dan, just take just a moment to have you just sit in quiet, in the quietness of your heart.
所以我想一个时间段，让大家全部人都安静，在神的面前。
I just want you to ask, in light of who God is, in light of what he's doing, what is the invitation that he's putting before you?
所以每个人都对神说：“神啊，你给我的邀请是什么？”
How is he inviting you to go deeper with him?
他如何邀请我在跟神的关系上更深、更深？
Or to be a part of what he's doing in your world, right where you work, right where you live?
或者是在你在工作的地方、你的家里，如何成为他的侍奉的一部分？
Jesus, you see all of our lives and all of our hearts.
耶稣，你看到我们每个人的心，
You see our joyful moments. You see our moments of failure and discouragement.
你看见我们喜乐的时刻，也看见我们失望、失败的光景。
And I thank you that today you're coming up to each of us in a fresh and new way.
主，我们感谢今天有个全新的方式，进入我们生命中。
And you're saying, come be with me. You are my child. Come be with me.
你在对我们说：“你是我的孩子，过来与我在一起。”
And you're promising to make us fishers of men and fishers of women.
你应许我们要成为得人如得鱼的人。
You're promising to let us be a part of this beautiful, amazing work that you're doing that's blessing every family of the nations.
让我们有份在你祝福万国、众多家庭的旅程中有份。
Lord, I want to thank you for this family in particular,
主，我为这个家庭献上感恩，
for their love, for their faith,
为
for
他
their
们的爱，
prayers.
为他们的祷告，为他们的信心。
And I thank you for letting Susan and I get a little picture of their lives and the beauty of you that exists in them.
感谢你带领我跟苏神有份在他们的生命中。
In Jesus' name.
奉耶稣基督的名，阿门。Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we'd love to hear next time from Genesis to Revelation. How God's work is unstoppable. 我很高兴，下次我们要请那个David 跟 Susan 带领我们就是从创世纪到启示录看看神的工作啊。我们下次邀请他，他那个 Susan has a degree in spiritual formation, the same as Jane. 所以 Susan 跟 Jane 有那个他是叫属灵修学的硕士，所以他生命中也是特别希望，所以就是说在与人跟神更亲近方面可以辅导，所以期待将来他们的服侍。Can we now welcome Amy? We thank Amy for what she and God have done through her and the team. 我们谢谢 Amy 好不好？在过去几个月，借着她和借着她的团队，在利物浦带来的祝福，好吗？我们一起鼓掌，谢谢她。Thank you so much.
That's good.
我们的神真美好，是吧？
I enjoyed listening to Dave and Susan. Thank you so much for coming.
很感恩，谢谢听到David 的分享。
Thank you.
谢谢。
So Pastor Daniel asked if I could come today to share about what I'm doing in Egypt.
所以我邀请他来分享他们在埃及所做的事工。Just a minute. How much time? Now we got 20 30 minutes. 我有30分钟好吗？
I thought I'd give you a bit of a background of where I've come from.
所以想跟大家有一点点的简介。
So in 2005,
在2005年的时候，
I was living in Spain.
我在西班牙住，西班牙南部。
And the Lord called me into North Africa.
所以神呼召我去到北非作为宣教士。
And that was 2006, I moved to Morocco.
所以2006年我去到了摩洛哥。
And I lived in Morocco for 10 years.
我在摩洛哥住了10年。
And at that point, through the 10 years, we were involved with the House of Prayer.
所以在10年，我做一件事情，就是带领那个祷告殿。
In a city called Fez.
在一个叫 Fez 这样的城市。
Which is connected. Actually, it's a long story, so I won't go into it today. But it's connected. It's actually twins. The city of Fez is twin-citied with the city of Cairo.
所以一个很长的故事，就讲到很长久的故事。那个 Fez 这个城市跟开罗城市是姐妹城。
And the guy who built the old city of Cairo and Al-Azhar Mosque.
所以那个建那个开罗的那个老城的这个人
was actually half Moroccan.
所以因为他是那个一半的摩洛哥人。
But that's a whole story, different story.
那是另外一个故事。
So I'm not going to go into that.
所以我们不会讲得更深入。
So I lived in Morocco for 10 years.
我在摩洛哥10年的时间。
In 2014.
在2014年的时候
I was invited to go to the North Africa border.
所以我被邀请去到北非的边界
To a place called Siwa.
所以去到一个地方叫做 Siwa.
Which borders is on the Egypt side, but borders into Libya.
所以在埃及的这一侧，但是它以那个利比亚的边界。
So there's a hill in this town which looks into Libya. You can see Libya.
所以那个山顶上可以看到利比亚的镇上。
So in 2014, I asked God. I said, God, what does this look like?
所以2014年的时候，我就问神，这个是看起来像什么呢？
And He said, I want you to build a highway between Egypt into North Africa.
所以他感动神对他说，我希望你从埃及建一个到北非的一个高速公路。
Seeing Egyptians being raised up and sent into North Africa as workers.
所以埃及人被差遣从埃及到北非作为工人。
And North Africans coming to Egypt.
所以北非的人呢去到埃及。
And so I was like, God, I can understand Egyptians going into North Africa.
我跟神说，神啊，我可以理解埃及人去北非。
Because that's been happening because it's an established church.
因为这个正好发生，因为埃及的很多教会被建造起来，他们有去这样做。
And even though, it's still a young church, it's still a young, it's the whole idea of a mission is still a very young idea.
所以在埃及，在这个教会做宣教方面，还是一个很幼嫩的那个想法。
What does that look like?
但是那
I
看起来会怎么
can
样呢？
see it, but what does that look like?
我可以看到将来会怎么样发展。
And then I asked God, I said, God, what does it mean for North Africans to come into Egypt?
但是北非的人怎么去埃及呢？我不理解。
Because there's no existing church.
因为在北非是没有现在的教会。
There's the underground church, but there's not the official existing church.
虽然在北非有一些地下的教会，但是就是没被
And it wasn't
广泛接纳。
And it wasn't until I arrived back into Egypt, into North Africa.
直到我重新回到北非
And
的
at
时候，
that point, we had a house of prayer. We had a house of prayer that was running.
所以那时候我在建造一个祷告殿，
And within a space of a year and a half,
在1年半的时间里，
God sent 3 different Egyptian groups to the house of prayer.
神差遣了3群埃及人去了那边的祷告殿。
And God started to speak to me about relocating into Egypt
所以神感动我要重新回归到埃及，
in order to start seeing Egyptians being raised up and sent.
所以以至于我可以看到更多的埃及人被兴起、被差遣到北非。
And that was, so I left Morocco in 2015 and
Okay.
moved to Egypt in 2016.
2015年离开了摩洛哥，2016年进入埃及。
But I didn't quite understand.
我不
I
是很理
stepped out
解
of，faith.
只是凭信心踏
And
出了
okay,
一步，
God, how are you going to do this? How are you going to build
只
this
是跟
bridge?
神讲说：“神啊，你要怎
How
么
are we
做
going
呢
to？see it?
我总会看见呢。”
So a lot of my ministry in Egypt
我在埃及的很多的侍奉，
is obviously the upper room.
事实上叫做
It's a huge
upper
part of
room，
it.
是很重要的一部分，叫做楼上事工，
But also working with North Africans. And if I can tell some stories,
也
I
可以
would
跟
love to.
北非人一起工作。当然有机会的话，我会跟你讲这一些故事。
So I didn't. So when I moved to Egypt, I didn't quite understand how we would receive Moroccans, North Africans into Egypt.
我在去了埃及的时候，很难想象怎么可能会接纳从那个摩洛哥和北非的人去呢？
And 2016,
2016年的时候，
I was invited to go to a conference in North Africa.
我被邀请去北非的一个领会中，
And this church had said to me, they said to me, hey, we want to support, because they were running the conference. It was a prophetic conference.
所以他们在一个先知性的一个领会中，他们想要支持。
And they said, hey, we want you to come to this conference,
我希望你来参加这个营会，
but we also want you to bring Egyptians.
我希望你把埃及人带来。
I said that, yeah, that's fine.
那是没有问题。
Amen. Let's do it. And when I was on my way back to Egypt,
当我往回走埃及的时候，
I was in the airport,
我在机场上，
and there was this girl from North Africa that came and sat next to me.
有个从北非
We're
来
on
的
the
人
same
坐在
flight
我旁
coming
边，
back, and she was living in Saudi.
他在沙特阿拉伯，
And she said to me, I'm on my way back to Saudi, but I have a layover in North Africa. In Egypt, sorry, I have a layover, a transit in Egypt.
OK， 所以他说我要去那个沙特阿拉伯，但是我要转机在
The
开罗。
flight from North Africa, this place, into Egypt is only 4 hours.
所以从埃及到北非到埃及的飞机是4个小时。
And as we were waiting to get on the plane, the engine of the plane fell off.
当我们在等待飞机的时候呢，那个飞机的那个发动机掉下来了，
So our flight was delayed.
所以我们的飞机被拖延了，
So we ended up staying 29 hours together.
所以我们以至于那个存了29个小时在一起。
We stayed in the hotel room
我
together.
们在酒店住在一起，我们一起
We
吃
flew，back to Egypt together.
我们飞回埃及一起。
And she said to me, she said, I want to take your number. Can I take your number?
他说我可以记一下你的电话号码
I
吗？
said, that's fine. So
What's
we took she just took my number. And 2 days later, she texts me and she says, I'm leaving my husband and I'm flying back to North Africa. Can we have a coffee?
2天后，他说我离开我的丈夫，我要回到北非，我们可以一起喝杯茶吗？
I said, yeah, sure. So we went for coffee. And she said to me, she said, hey, I've never seen a church before. Can you take me to visit a church?
然后他说在喝咖啡的时候，他说我从来没去过教会，你可以带我去教会吗？
And at this point, we were next to the biggest evangelical church in the Middle East.
所以那个点上，我们就是在一个最大的福音派教会旁边。
So we went into this church
我们进去教会里边，
and she says, Amy, I need to leave.
他一进去的时候说：“哎，我也
So
不
I
行，
can't stand it. I need to
我
leave.
没办法在里边站立。
And I said, can I ask you a question? What's happening?
我可以问你为什么
And
呢？
she's like, Amy, do not speak to me.
他说 Amy 不要跟我讲话，
I need to leave this place
我必须要
immediately.
从这地方立刻离开。
And I said, what's going on? I said, Amy, please do not speak to me. I need to leave this place immediately.
我问他为什么，他说 Amy 你不要讲了，我必须从这里立刻离开。
And so we left.
所以我们立刻离开了。
And then I gave her we were having coffee on the Nile on one of the coffees.
我们在尼罗河旁边的咖啡厅喝咖啡。
I think I can't remember. I gave her a booklet about Jesus.
我给了他一个关于耶稣的本子小册子，
And it wasn't until a bit later
直到比较晚的时候，
that I asked her the question. I said, what happens when you're in that coffee shop?
我再次问他，你
But it was
在
inside when you were in the
里面的时
church.
候发生
What
在
happens
教
when
会
you're
里
in
的
the
时候
church?
发生了什么事情？
And she said, I don't know what happened, but something happened in my heart.
他说我不知道发生什么事，但是在我们的心里边发生了事情。
And then we went for a walk together.
我们在一起散步，
And I put my hand on her back. I said, can I pray for you?
我在他的手按在他背上说：“我为你祷告，可以吗
And she's, and I'm like, what's happening? ？”
所以他说：“啊！”然后他说：“是发生什么事情？
And she says, I don't know what it is, but I can see love in front of me.
我不知道是什么事，但是我会看见爱在我的前面。”
So that was the first, which made me think, okay, this is what this a little bit of revelation came to me.
所以我觉得这是我第一次觉得一个预备。
Fast forward,
再往前走，
December of 2020,
2020年的时候，
I was in Cairo
我在开罗，
and I was in the mall, at one of the malls in Cairo.
我在一个开罗的一个大超市里。
And I was, for some reason, I was led to look at a shoe shop. I'm not a shopper, I don't like to shop, but for some reason I felt I needed to go and look at a pair of shoes.
但是我并不是一个喜欢购物的
See,
人，
all
但
of my
是有什么
ministry
理
is
由，
prophetic.
我就进去了一个鞋店。
That's how I am. It's all prophetic. And I was walking around the shop and then I went to walk out and this North African came into the shop.
所以当我从这个店里走，
And
就
she was
往
in
外走的时候，
the
北非的人进来，
The galabaya, the dress that they wear.
他们穿了那个全身黑的那个衣 服
And
装。
immediately I was drawn to her. And I said, so I went and we talked and we got to know each other.
所以我就开始跟他讲话，我们彼此认识。
And she said, I'm so happy that you speak my language. Can you give me your number?
所以他说我真的很高兴你会说我的话，你会把我的电话号码给我吗？
So we exchanged numbers and then we
Okay,
said
how
goodbye. And then
much?
I left and then she phoned me and she's like, if you have time, can we have coffee?
所以他又打电话给我，他说有时间的
So
话，我们一
if
起
you
喝咖啡
notice that there's a rhythm, there's
所以
coffee. All coffee.
一直都是咖啡。
And I asked her the question, said, what brought you to Cairo?
我问他一个问题，你是什么东西把你带到开罗来的？
And she says, honestly, the reason why I came to Cairo
他说老实说，我来到开罗的原因是
was to search for truth.
我在寻找真理，
That's why.
这就是为
Because I
什么
can't do it in my country. But when I come to Egypt, I can search
我
for
没有办
truth.
法在我的家乡寻求真理，但我在埃及可以。
So she ends up coming to church with me that
所以
night.
他开始跟我一起去教会，
And there was a song
有一首
that
歌
we were singing.
在唱，
And she says, the words of that song, it was all about Jesus reaching down and rescuing.
那首歌的歌词一直讲的是耶稣那个下面去拯救人。
She says, the words of that song actually describes a dream I had.
所以那首歌的歌词正好描述到我的一个梦，
So now I want to follow.
所以我现在我愿意跟随。
And that was the revelation. I was like, this is it.
我说对了，这
It's
就对了。
about Egyptians going into North Africa.
所以是讲到那埃及人进到北非，
But the North Africans coming is all about them coming, God bringing them to Egypt, because it talks about blessed be Egypt, my people, a blessing in the midst of the earth. That's Isaiah 19.
所以从北非人进到埃及来寻求真理，所以圣经上说的就是埃及得到祝福。
So Isaiah 19 talks about the Isaiah 19 highways, talks about Egypt being a blessing in the midst of the
所以以赛亚书的19章 特别讲到那个高速公路，讲到埃及成为祝福。
That actually Egypt is a very prophetic nation.
所以埃及是有一个很有预言性的国
And
家。
then later, maybe another time, I can then talk on Isaiah 19, the Isaiah 19 highway.
下次有机会的话，我会跟大家分享那个以赛亚书19章的高速公路。
If you, the Egyptians call Egypt Dunya, which means the mother of the world.
那个埃及人称自己是世界的母亲，
And that's actually very prophetic.
所以其实这个也是具有预言性的。
Because if you think of a role of a mother is to nurture, a mother is accepting, a mother feeds, a mother clothes, a mother is very different from the role of a father.
你想想那个母亲的角色，母亲的角色跟父亲的角色很不一样，因为母亲要喂养、保护、带领。
But Egypt is called to be the mother of the world.
但是埃及被呼召要做世界的母
And
亲，
it talks about, blessed be Egypt, my people, a blessing in the midst of the earth.
所以这里谈到说，埃及人蒙福
So
要
it's got a
祝福世界，
On
有个呼召。
the nation of Egypt has a calling to receive different nations.
所以埃及有个那个呼召
North
要
Africa
领
is one
受
of those
各国的人，
nations.
领受各个国家的人。
And it also has a call on it to also send.
所以同时又有一个呼召要差遣出去。
So what I find in is that God is bringing nations, bringing North Africans, and I work a lot with North Africans in Egypt. That's a lot of my ministry.
所以我很多的事工都是跟北非的人在一起。
But the vision is not to see North Africans come and live for many years. It's to God's bringing them to meet Him, to get something of Him, and then to go back into North Africa and to serve their people.
所以神把北非人带到埃及的一个目的，并不是在里边发财做什么事情，常年在里面做，而是让他在那边寻找真理，遇见真理，重新回到北非。
Just in our upper room in Cairo, we had a couple of months ago, we had two North African believers.
所以在几个月前，在那个我叫楼上施工的一个祷告中，有几个北非的人来。
That both came together. I mean, these nations are not politically on good terms with each other.
所以这些国家，北非跟埃及，政治上其实是不好。
But they embraced each other, and they hugged each other, and they prayed for each other.
但是那些人来到这边的时候，彼此拥抱，一起祷告。
So a lot of what God is doing and saying and bringing, I feel like God's bringing me into.
所以我感到神把我带到这样子的光景中，
Is very, very prophetic.
所以具有先知
It's
性
got
的，
a very prophetic call.
有个很先知性的呼召。
And I bring you to Romans 4, actually.
我想带领大家读罗马书的4章。
And I love, I'm not going to go into this, although I would love to talk about promise a lot, but it's one of my favorite subjects to preach on, but I'm not going to, just going to touch on it briefly.
所以我只是简单的
So
提到一
Romans
些
4,
神对
verses
亚伯拉罕的祝福。
12, well, actually not 13 to 17.
So 12节到17节，
Sorry, 18.
18节。
And it talks about the faith of Abraham. I love the faith of Abraham.
所以我们很
It's
喜
one of my
欢
favorite
亚伯拉
prophets in
罕
the
的
Bible.
祝福，
Is Abraham.
亚伯拉罕的应许。
And a lot of what God did and God said, Abraham couldn't see.
很多上帝对亚伯拉罕说的东西，亚伯拉罕没法看见，
And he had to leave his comfort zone
他必须离开自己的安全区，
in order for him to receive the promise.
以至于他可以接收这个应许。
And actually, I reckon that if Abraham was alive today,
我想，如果亚伯拉罕今天活着的话，
he would be quite jealous.
我想他应该会很嫉妒我们，
Because a lot of what Abraham did was set up for us to receive now.
因为亚伯拉罕当年做的很多的事情，就是为了今天我们可以接收。
And I love that because of Abraham's obedience to what God was saying.
我很触动是因为亚伯拉罕顺服神所说的话，
He saw things come into being. And it says this, I just lost my place, sorry.
所以他凭信
I
心
think it's,
看见
yeah,
所
who
没
he
看见的东
believes,
西。
the God who gives life to the dead and calls things that are not as though they were.
所以神将
So it's, yeah, so it's 17.
17
So it says, as it is written, I have made you a father of many nations. He is our father in the sight of God, in whom he believes, the God who gives life to the dead and calls things that are not as if they were.
所以17节是这样说的，亚伯拉罕所信的是叫死人复活、使无变有的神。在这位神面前，亚伯拉罕成为我们众人的父。如经上记着，我已经立你做多国的父。
So a lot of the things when people say, tell us what you do in Egypt.
所以很多时候人家问我你在埃及
It's
做什么，
really hard to tell you
我觉得我非常难以回答这个问题，
because a lot of it is
因为很多事
calling
情，
things into being.
所以应该是就是呼召事情能
And
够
that's
成
the
为现实。
prophetic ministry is just to see with eyes. I asked the Lord not so long ago, what does the house of prayer look like in this next coming time?
所以很多的那个祷告殿的所做的事情，并不是说立刻看结果的，而是正是用先知性的眼光看事情。
And he said, you know, the house of prayer has to operate through the eyes of the prophetic.
所以那个祷告殿一定要用先知性的眼光来看。
So that's a lot of what I'm doing with the house of prayer, with the upper room in
所以
Egypt.
这是我在埃及做的万国祷告殿的一个事情。
Is everything is through the eyes of the prophetic.
所以很多事情是从先
And
知
to
性
be
的眼光
honest,
看。
I think as Christians, we tend to make the prophetic a little bit weird.
但是我想告诉大家，我们基督徒
It's
有些
actually
时
not
候
a
常
weird
常
thing. It's
常常把
literally
先知
to
性的
see
东
what
西
God
这个
is
世
doing
界
in，heaven and releasing it onto the earth.
所以我们常常把
That's
先
all
知
the
性的
prophetic
东西
is.
看
It's
作是
getting his heart and releasing it into our spheres.
所以很多人一谈到先知性的东西呢，就是觉得很奇怪、很害怕。但事实上，先知性的东西就是把天上的那个事情，将它带进到我们今天的现实。
So that's what. So before the pandemic, I was also traveling back and forth into North Africa.
在疫情前，我常常在北非的地方出入。
Because I believe, and this is why I'm so excited about what's happening here with the upper room and everything here.
所以这是我想，也是我非常兴奋。在这边我们开始有祷告殿，
And what God is doing amongst you guys.
所以我也很兴奋神在这里所行的事情。
Because prophetically speaking, and it's in the Bible as well. Everything is in the Bible. Everything that's prophetic is in the Bible.
所以任何其实从那个先知性的话语去说的话，
China has such a role to play into the Middle East.
所以中国在圣经上预言说，中国在中东有很重要的工作要做。
But I believe that what God is wanting to do in the Middle East,
我相信神要在中东所做的事情，
without the input of China,
如果没有中国人的投入，
and it's not going to be complete. You've got a call to
我相信，
go into the Middle East.
我相信没有中国人最终的投入
So this
没有办法最
very
终的完成。
prophetic. This is
所
very
以这是
biblical
很具有先知性的。
of what God's wanting to do from this place into the Middle East and into
从这
North
个地
Africa.
方，从华人进入中东，这是神的一个
So
思
I'm
路性。
excited about just kind of that whole development of things into the upper room from the All Nations Hub into Middle East.
所以我很兴奋，从万国园、从利物浦从这边 我们有对埃及的那
and
个，
then across the Middle East and then into North Africa. I think
所以
this
进
is,
入非洲，进入中东，
we have many years ahead of deepening relationships with each other.
所以我们有很多年的时间，我们可以进一步的建立关系。
So I'm excited about our friendship.
我很高兴我们建立这样朋友
It's
的关
really
系，
good.
非常感
Really
恩
good.，
非常感恩。
So yeah, so pray for me because I'm going back on Friday.
所以大家为我祷告，星期五又回去了。
And then we have more of the development of the upper room coming up in the next few weeks.
所以在接下来几个星期，我们会有另外一个叫做楼上施工的祷告。
But then also how to develop things in a wider place.
所以在更广泛的就是这个祷告施工如何的开展。
But I do want to finish with a question.
所以我最后要用一个问题来结束。
As Abraham had to leave his comfort zone,
当亚伯拉罕必须离开自己的，
everything in order to receive the promise.
所以亚伯拉罕要接收这个应许，这个祝福，他必须离开自己的安全区。
What are the things that God is saying for you to leave in order for you to receive the promise?
对你，神在说什么呢？让你领受他的应许。你有什么东西要？
And I think that maybe God has spoken to you about promises.
也许神
I
对你说
believe
过
He
应
probably
许，
has spoken to you about promises.
我相信神对你说过关于应许。
So what are the things that God is asking you to step out into?
有什么事情神在邀请你踏出这个安全区呢？
I have a friend last night, she's Egyptian. A friend called me last night, she's Egyptian.
昨天有个朋友是埃及人，他打电话给我，
And she says she's actually very prophetic.
他是很具有先知性的，
And she said, I believe that 2022 will start in February.
所以我相信2022年是从2月份开始的。
I was like, I was like,
Very
please
Chinese.
explain more.
非常非常中国性。
And she says, we're no longer in 2021 and we're not yet in 2022.
他说我们现在不再是2021年，我们又还没进入2022年，
And actually January is just a transitional month.
所以1月是个过渡月。
So I said that's very interesting that you would think that, but there's a lot of people that believes that that February is going to be a very significant year.
很多人都相信2月份是非常有
So I guess my question to you is, what are the things that God is asking you to step out of as we're coming to the end of January, and what are the things that we're supposed to step into in the beginning of February to
所以
receive
在2
what
月份要
God
结
is
束，
wanting to give us in
2 月份要开始之
this
前，你有什么东西要从安全期踏出来？
Amen. Maybe at some point I can go more deeper into these scriptures.
OK， 希望以后有机会可以更深入的跟大家分享。Thank you, thank you. 那么谢谢 Amy，